Eddie George leaving Tennessee State for Bowling Green is a move that's going to impact Tennessee State for the rest of 2025, even though the year just started. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on X at South Exclusive. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We changed it up because today's episode is all about change. Matter of fact, FanDuel is changing up for you. They're giving you $200 back in bonus bets if you're a new customer. If your first $5 bet wins, go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. We have 8 teams on the Division II level who are going to be in the NCAA tournament between our men's and women's basketball teams. We'll get to those 8 at the end of the show, but we kick it off with the change. And this is the biggest change that you will get for the rest of the season. I'll say for at least the next couple of months until we get to actual football season. Eddie George leaving Tennessee State is the biggest story that you can get in March, and at least in football. I know we got March Madness, and if you're a basketball fan, excuse my favoritism, but Eddie George leaving Tennessee State is the biggest news that we will get in the early part of 2025. For that reason, we will explore this story from a multitude of different angles until at least Thursday. I have it already planned out until Thursday. It won't be all 3 segments every day. Today, it'll only be 2. The next day, it'll be 1. The next day, it'll be 1. The next day, it'll be 1. Then the next day, it'll be 1. Right? So that's 4 days. So, yeah, we have this planned out because this is a move that is going to shake up so much. The departure of Eddie George is a move that Tennessee State, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, I'm not trying to be dramatic. This is a move that Tennessee State will feel for the rest of the calendar year. And I know we're just in March. This is something that you have to determine how are you going to move afterwards, because this is absolutely terrible timing. Eddie George leaving was always a realistic possibility. Eddie George leaving in March put Tennessee State so far behind the 8 ball, and they're going to be farther behind the 8 ball once the transfer portal opens up. There are so many ripple effects when it comes to this move. The first thing you need to wonder, well, how many people is Eddie George going to take with him to Bowling Green? That goes for staff, that goes for roster, and I think those are both important questions. You've already lost players like Boogie Trotter, already lost players like Sanders Ellis. So you've already lost key contributors. And I'm not even getting to the players who actually graduated and they just left because of draft purposes. They ain't had no eligibility left. I'm talking about people who chose to leave. And guess what? There's going to be more. There are going to be more players who enter the transfer portal now that Eddie George is gone. You know Eric George is gone. He's going to follow his dad. That just makes sense. It wouldn't even make sense for him to stay at Tennessee State. He's going to go to Bowling Green. There's going to be some other players who are going to go because, and I know we can have conversations about celebrity coaching status and whatnot. That has absolutely nothing to do with this decision. Absolutely nothing to do, because there's guys like I can only reference Deion Sanders, but there's players who went there because of Deion Sanders. I'm sure there's people who went there because of Eddie George, but at the same time, he's been here for 4 years. I think that he still has a core of players who have been there for a few years who could become ingratiated with the university, right? So Deion was there for like 2 years. And I think that it's easy to not be fully ingrained in the university in that short amount of time. Eddie George has players who are going to follow him who have extreme loyalty to Tennessee State. And please, that's just a sweeping statement. I understand that there's Jackson State players who were there for a year who felt incredibly tied to JSU. But in general, I think that 3 years is a time where no matter where you are, you probably feel pretty indebted to that university. But here's the thing. And I didn't say this yet, but let me say it now. Congratulations to Eddie George. I don't think I have any ill will. I don't think many people have any ill will to this decision. I think we pretty much understand. We'll talk about what this means for George himself in segment 2, because I do think that this changes the way that I look at Eddie George as a coach, right? Like, I think I put him into a different category now that he made the decision to go to Bowling Green. But in general, there are going to be players and coaches who may want to follow Eddie George. That's the way that I personally look at it. So now I must ask myself, how does Tennessee State move from here? And I'm going to advocate for Tennessee State to do something that I never advocate for any university to do, and that's enter the 2025 season with an interim head coach. I really do think that that is the best decision for them. I do not believe in giving a coach 1 year to succeed. I've talked about this before, different sport, different conference, but I've talked about it. I don't believe in giving coaches 1 year to succeed. I don't believe in giving coaches 1 year to succeed. I think that that sets them up for failure. I think it puts unrealistic expectations on them. I'll give you an interim head coach because now the expectations are lower. You just have to show that you can become a long-term head coach. You show building blocks. That is technically a 1 year deal. But the truth of the matter is this. I never advocate for people to do interim head coaches at the beginning of the year. Actually, I'm very anti this premise. But there are exceptions to pretty much every rule. And this is my exception. The timeline is different. Coaches are supposed to be done being acquired by new teams in March. You're not supposed to be still looking for a coach in March, let alone just now losing your head coach. You got spring ball on the way. The spring game is April 12th, so I can only assume that practices are going to start within the next week and a half or so. You would like, in a perfect world, you would like your head coach to be a part of spring ball to at least maximize the install process. So can you find a new head coach in that short amount of time? Yeah, you can. Will it be a quality hire? Maybe, maybe not. I guess it's always a crapshoot depending on how you look at it. But I personally would like to have a lot more time to make that decision. I would like to not have to rush to that decision. Though it's always a gamble, rushing to the gamble makes me feel like I'm taking a whole lot more risks than if I had a month to decide and I decided in a week. That's different. Only having a week versus deciding in a week, two completely different situations. Tennessee State is in the former. They only have a week. They only have a week, 2 weeks. Like, they don't have much time. So I will go with the interim head coach route and then just double back next season. You'll have the ability to scout coaches, because if you have an interim, I'm not saying that he can't get the job, but you do have your eye elsewhere at the same time. So you can scout coaches, and then you can take the approach of taking a month after the season, taking 3 weeks after the season, whatever. Like you can maneuver differently. So it's a terrible time on that front, because now you have to figure out what you're going to do with coaching. I'm all about long-term answers, and I think the best way to get a long-term answer is by going back to the well after the 2025 season, which in turn would impact you all through the regular season. This is the move. Like I said, it has tremors that you're going to feel for the rest of the calendar year. I think an interim head coach would allow you to keep some coaches on the staff as well. I think that it will help you keep some players. I think there's certain ways to go about it. I'll look at it tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to look at replacement options. So I'll try to talk about the pros of going the interim route a little bit more extensively on tomorrow's episode. The other aspect of why this is terrible timing is that players are going to enter the portal now. And I guess there was no time in which that would have been good for you, but I would hate to have it done now, because the biggest transfer portal session to be that winter session. Now these people can enter the portal in the spring, but they can't be there for spring ball because it's going to be after the fact. There's going to be players who their stock is already high. They were committed to Tennessee State, but their stock was already high. What do you do now? You go ahead and, I'm not playing spring ball. I'm going to opt out, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the portal because my stock is high. Now, if I'm a guy who I probably still need to prove some things and then I would like to leave, then I will go ahead and play in spring ball, try to get my tape, try to get my practice tape in to have the best moments, because you've seen players, at least on the HBCU level, you've seen players who, well, I've seen players who I'm going off of their practice tape because that's what I have to go off of. It's different. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but you go with what you got. And sometimes you just got to maximize your value in whatever way that you can maximize it, and doing it through practice tape can help. So I this is tough. This is tough for Tennessee State. You've already lost star players. You've already lost star players via the transfer portal. You're probably going to lose a couple of more. Eric George is out of here because, of course, he's following his dad. You don't know who else is going to join the line of players who are leaving. Let me say this. There are two things that make players enter the transfer portal the quickest: individual success / team success. Let's group that into one, and then coaching changes. So success and coaching changes. Tennessee State has seen both of those this offseason, but the staggered timeline between the end of the season and George's departure is going to make the exodus of players sting a whole lot more. See, if I would have lost Eric George, Boogie Trotter, and Sanders Ellis all at one time, I could take that. But if I got to lose two, and then now I'm obviously about to lose George, and that's just the first person I can bring up, the biggest example, the most obvious example of somebody who's going to leave, who is impactful. I got to leave. I got to lose one in December or January, and I got to lose the other one in March, April. Yeah, that's going to sting. Now I got to take the blow twice. This is tough. But moving forward, what does this mean for Eddie George? I say I put him in a different category. It wasn't a disrespect to who he was at Tennessee State, but this decision, it reflects a change in mindset that I want to look at as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order all products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed, with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts with over 400 of the top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, if you use the promo SH5, you'll get 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Wayfair. Your home should reflect your style. Maybe you like a modern environment. Maybe you're a guy who still likes listening to the retros. You want to have a retro environment in your living room. I need a new rug. I'm going to be in the market for a rug, and I know exactly where I'm going to go to purchase it. It's Wayfair. Because whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, Wayfair has everything you need in one place, and it makes it easy to find the perfect piece no matter what your space is or your budget. I love it. From cozy furniture to stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves. It's everything. Wayfair has it all in prices that fit your budget. So if you're looking for the new piece, such as the rug that I want to search for, I haven't figured out my color yet, go to Wayfair. It's made easy to compare styles in fast, free delivery. So go ahead and go to wayfair.com and find something that's just your style. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on NFL. The NFL free agency is here. It's the legal tampering period, which means we can have deals that are agreed upon, though they are not officially signed. Still, Locked on NFL is here to recap all of the biggest news. Eddie George is out of Tennessee State. He's going to Bowling Green. I'm really shocked about this move and the time frame that it happened. I talk about how the time frame really impacts Tennessee State, but the time frame also impacts how I reacted to this. This was shocking. I do not believe that Eddie George leaving Tennessee State was overly shocking, but I do think the time frame in which he did it, the middle of March, I didn't see this coming. On Friday, you hear that, or was it Saturday, Sunday? It was something around there. It was this weekend. You hear that on Friday, he interviewed, and he was one of 3 finalists. At that moment, I said, I think he's going to get picked. Then you hear on Saturday or Sunday that a deal has been put out to him. So that means now he's the favorite. And I knew it. I just felt in my gut he was going to go. But I will say this, until these reports came out, I did not think that this was going to be the path for Eddie George. Call it naive if you want to, But I thought that Eddie George was going to be at Tennessee State for a lot longer. And then when the Chicago Bear interview happened, I began to change my perspective. I said, okay, people are going to start taking note. And then at that moment, I said, Eddie George will be here for another year. Definitely because of the time. That was mid-January, maybe early February. Between mid-January to early February that he had that interview with the Chicago Bears. So I said, okay, people are going to start taking note. And it happened. It happened. I'll say this. I did not think that Bowling Green was going to be his next stop. I thought that a P5 would come calling for him. It doesn't have to be a great P5. I think or P4 now, I think when we hear Power 4, Power 5 conferences, we just think great teams. There's a lot of not good to bad Power 4 teams. Let's be very clear. Look at where Deion went. Colorado sucked. Let me not say sucks. I think that he's done a solid job building up that program step by step. But Colorado, when he got there, that is a bottom of the barrel squad. That is a bottom of the barrel program for years. So it's not as if everybody's great on that level and that everybody who wanted him had to be one of the best Power 4 schools. I think when we say, Power 4, you think Ohio State. No, it doesn't have to necessarily be Ohio State. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. You could have a school like, I'm just going to use Vanderbilt because I'm in SEC country, right? So Vanderbilt ain't that good. I know they had a solid season this year. No disrespect to the Commodores, but they ain't that good. That is a bottom level SEC school. I thought that those type of schools may have come calling for him within a year. But I'll tell you why the decision to go to Bowling Green is important, because had Eddie George went to a Vanderbilt, had he gone to a Power 4 school, I looked at that as an offer that he probably just couldn't have refused. But the decision to go to Bowling Green shows me a shift in his mentality of being a coach. And some of the quotes that he gave after the fact of why he left, yeah, it shows to me that I feel like he has a different mentality. You have to understand, if my memory serves me correctly, Eddie George didn't even want to take the Tennessee State job. Not because he didn't want to be at Tennessee State, but because he had no interest in being a coach. This dude was out here doing theatrical stuff, and he was out here doing financials. Like he was going to work with Tennessee State because he already was from a financial standpoint. But as far as being the head coach of Tennessee State, Also, I think Mickey Allen, the athletic director, is the current interim head coach. Don't really love that. I would like for him to move to somebody who's already on the staff. That's my personal opinion. I said that. I didn't say that earlier when I was talking about interims, but yes, that's how I feel about it. But anyway, the point is, Eddie George made this comment. He said, the community here at Tennessee State allowed me to find the love of coaching. Obviously, he had no desire to do it. Now that he's discovered that love, I look at him completely different. Now that he's discovered the love of coaching, and I didn't need him to say that for me to realize it. I had that written in my notes. Mason Smith, good friend of the show, good friend of mine, he sent me an article about some of the quotes. He said, hey, man, before you record, read this. Because, I'm good for recording before I read. I'm good for hearing the news, boom, not reading nothing else. Just, I heard the news, let me just go and do it. So he knows I'm good for that. So he's like, hey, man, read this before you record. And one of the quotes in there that I don't think he really wanted me to look for, but I found was, the community here at Tennessee State allowed me to find the love of coaching. I'd already written that in my notes. I could tell by the fact of him going to Bowling Green, he had found a love for coaching, because now Eddie George is looking to climb the coaching ladder. I didn't think he had any desire to do it, which is why I thought that he could have stayed at Tennessee State for a couple of years. I thought that he could have been a near 10-year coach at Tennessee State, because I didn't think he had this great love for coaching. I didn't think he wanted to climb the ladder. Like I said, I thought that maybe a P5, P4 would come calling. So at that point, it's an offer you can't refuse. But until they started calling, I thought he was going to stay at Tennessee State. I genuinely did. I thought that Eddie George would stay at Tennessee State. He'll be the head coach of the Tigers until a Power 4 school said, hey, we like what you're doing. Let's make you the head coach over here. I thought that was a path for him. I was wrong about that. He ended up going to a G5 school in Bowling Green, which ain't nothing wrong with. That's how people climb the ladder. You look at Willie Simmons. He loves FAMU. I'm not even going to put a D on there. He loves FAMU. There's no past tense. That being said, he left the Rattlers to go be a positional coach because he understands the game he needed to play. And look at it. A year later, he's a head coach at FIU. Congratulations to Willie Simmons, the same way as congratulations to Eddie George. With that being the case, I now look at Eddie George as a rising star. I did not look at, there's two parts to being a rising star, because there's two words, right? Rising and star. I always looked at Eddie George as being a star when he was at Tennessee State, because I looked at the program that he's built. I looked at the way that he's handled himself. I looked at the way that he spoke to media, the things that he spoke on. I thought he was a star, and I thought that he was a great leader of men. He showcased that at Tennessee State. But was he attempting to rise? Not in my opinion. I did not think that he was trying to go elsewhere. Maybe rise within his own space, right? Like, maybe I want to decorate the crib. I'm not trying to go get a new house. He went to go get a new house, though. I don't know if that's the best analogy. I liked it. Come on, say it with chest, Darrion. But anyway, the point is, I didn't look at Eddie George as attempting to rise. He was just a star, not a rising star. He was good with where he was. And I should have seen this a little bit more. I should have realized that he would not be turning down these opportunities. I thought these opportunities would arise, but I didn't think he would even go in for an interview. I can't remember exactly how I said it when talking about the Chicago Bear interview and how this could raise his profile. I did think it was going to raise his profile. I guess I just thought he wasn't going to do anything with the raised profile. That's naive. That's naive on my part. Saying it out loud, that is naive on my part to take that approach. To me, like I said before, I thought it would take more to get him out. That's cool though. Now I see the love. Why did he leave? And this one stings, man. This one stings a whole lot. He says, my intentions were really to stay here at Tennessee State with hopes that things would definitely get better and so forth. And they will eventually, but just not in this time frame, and I understand that. That's heavy. I don't even know if I really need to talk about it, because I think that kind of speaks for itself. But that last two sentences, or those last three sentences, really, at least how they're cut up in this clip. And they will eventually, but just not in this time frame. And I understand that. And because he understood it, he had to go. That hurts. That stings. To know that you can't get it together quick enough. Because the truth of the matter is, we were hoping that some of these guys who are celebrity coaches, I think that was the desire when it first started, when you first see a Deion Sanders, when you first see an Eddie George, you're hoping that they're around long enough for things to change. But then you realize when you're a George, when you're a Sanders, that you know what? Things aren't changing fast enough, and I can't be here this whole time. That's why I always say, those who stick at the HBCU level, you're strong, because there's certain challenges that you're overcoming consistently, that your success, that your stock, you could leave and not have to overcome those challenges. I never knock somebody who says, I want to go elsewhere. I don't care if it's climbing the ranks because you just always wanted to reach a pinnacle, or if it's because, hey, I just don't want to deal with some of the things that I'm dealing with. Both are valid reasons. But for him to say, they'll get better eventually. Don't lose hope, Tennessee State. They just wouldn't happen fast enough. That was rough. I do think I saw a tweet. It was funny. Someone said that they knew George was out of here when he said more people at the tailgate than the game. And I remember that. That was funny. I was on George's side with that because I'm a very football-centric guy, and I understand that everybody is not. I talked to a friend of mine. He said, look, man, I went for the vibes. I went for the environment. This was like a party with a football game involved. This was when we was in college that he felt this way, but he told me about it whenever this happened, right? Like I don't know, that was last year. I didn't necessarily feel like that was a nail in the coffin, but I'll say this, reflecting back, it does make sense why he would want to go elsewhere, because he probably wants something that aligns with his football persona. He loves every part of Tennessee State. I could tell that. I don't think he loved that part of Tennessee State, so maybe not every part, but I think he loved everything that came with the HBCU culture and all of that. There was just certain frustrations with the way that the team itself was treated as a secondary piece at times, and I know that can be irritating to a player who played at the highest level, who's like, man, football is the most important. Y'all talking about party, and we can party after the game. Let's focus on this game right now. Let's not show up when it's just HBCU versus HBCU. Let's show up when I'm facing Tennessee Tech, you know? And I get it, because I feel the same way. I'm a huge football head at the end of the day. That's what I do, you know? I think that going to Bowling Green may fit a little bit with his football persona of being so 60-minute focused. I do think that as far as the fan, not the players, but just the fans. But most importantly, I think it represents a return to Ohio. And I always thought that if he rose his stock high enough, that maybe he could get the Ohio State job. I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen now because Ryan Day just won a national championship, and I think that that should earn him some grace. It should earn him, unless things just go pew and crash. I think that this should earn Ryan Day 4 or 5 years. Like I really do think that, and unless somebody rises up in the Big Ten again, and then Ohio State drops. Now, if you keep losing to Michigan, that 4 to 5 years may drop to 2-3. But at the end of the day, you just won a national championship. That's going to earn you some grace. Maybe that's enough time for Eddie George to build himself up at Bowling Green. He's back in the state that he played football in with Ohio State. Maybe this is the next step. I've had a coach tell me, look, I'm going to get this job. He ain't there yet. These are, look, I'm going to get this job. So I know people who have, obviously, you've seen Willie Simmons. He wanted to get to FAMU. People say Eric Dooley wanted to get to Southern. So, like, people have these dream jobs of where they feel like they should be. I think that's Eddie George in Ohio State. I really do. No one's ever said it to me, but I mean, the writing's on the wall. Just like the writing was on the wall that he was going to leave. I didn't think it was going to be this imminent. I thought maybe next offseason that a Power 4 would call for him, but he went to G5 level. Eddie George is a rising star, and I say that because I don't think that Bowling Green is the last place that he wants to be. He's found a love from coaching that he didn't think that he would have, and now he wants to climb the ranks. I believe that he's going to try to reach the pinnacle of being a Power 4 school or being the head coach of a Power 4 school. I can't wait to watch it happen. Good luck to Eddie George. Moving forward, and we're not done with George for the week, obviously, but moving forward, we're going to look at the Division II tournament because we have 8 HBCUs who are in the D2 NCAA tournament via the men and the women's side combined. Let's look at that as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm talking about the Division II NCAA tournament in next segment, but what about the big dance? What about March Madness, the Division I NCAA tournament? There are always going to be huge spreads in the first round because you have 1 seed versus 16 seeds. I suggest you get in on that. That's the best time because you always assume they're going to cover. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but you assume that they are going to cover. You go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. Put down $5 on the top 1 seed against the worst 16 seed and watch yourself win and get that $200 back in bonus bets because FanDuel is offering that to any new customer. Any new customer, if they put down a $5 bet that wins, they'll get $200 back in bonus bets. Go ahead and get some easy money so you can make some more difficult money, make some more difficult bets. Go ahead and go to FanDuel, whether it's March Madness, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NFL draft. I'm sure they have some free agency things. I'll look that up. So next time we talk about it, I can bring them to you. You have all of that. You just got to go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I changed it up and I kind of like that. I ain't gonna lie to you. I kind of like that. I kind of like it. Usually I do the same head. I go boom, boom, but I kind of like the boom, boom, boom. I like it. For all my audio people, that sounds so stupid. You don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just talking about the way that I put up my hands at the beginning of segment 3. I usually do it one way, and I chose to go another this time. I kind of like, let's see if I remember it, because I was on accident, but let's see if I remember it moving forward. But boy. Anyway, let's roll. Let's roll. We have 8 Division II teams who have made the, who have made the Division II NCAA tournament. And obviously, on the men's and women's side, the CIAA is easy. They're both going to include Fayetteville State and Virginia State. We did a whole segment on last Tuesday, I think, about how the CIAA, or was it Wednesday? It was sometime last week. That's all I know. That's all I know, man. This month, these days, they just been clinched, like just together. I don't know what's going on. I can't remember what happened when, and already neither here nor there. So last week we talked about the CIAA tournament and how all signs are pointing to Fayetteville State versus Virginia State. We didn't get it on the men's and the women's side. We did get it on the women's side. And both of those teams ended up making the Division II tournament. Those were the CIAA representatives in that on that side. So on the women's basketball side, they represented it. On the men's side, you had the CIAA represented by 3 teams, 2 of which were Fayetteville State and Virginia State. But then also additionally, you had Bluefield State, who made the CIAA tournament and knocked off Fayetteville. So if y'all remember correctly, during the NCAA or during the CIAA tournament, you had Fayetteville State and Virginia State. We were watching them. They made the semis on both sides. On the women's side, that ended up being the conference championship game. So, of course, those were the 2 teams who made it. Made a lot of sense, right? Then on the men's side, Fayetteville did not make it. They might have been one of the top dogs during the regular season, and that's what earned them a spot here. But Bluefield made it to the conference championship. I thought that was something that probably really swung swung the tide in their favor for making this game, because you were able to come in and be a runner up. You were able to do that. So I do think that should make sense, or that made sense, I should say. They went 19-11 in this year. You had Virginia State, who ended up winning the whole thing. Of course, they made it. They got an automatic bid. So did Virginia State. Got an automatic bid on the men's side. Fayetteville State got an automatic bid on the women's side. And that's the representative for the CIAA. So that's 5 right there. 5 CIAA teams made it into the D2 tournament. Now, what about the SIAC? They didn't get any at-larges. You have Fayetteville State at large. You have Bluefield State at large on the men's side. You have Virginia State at large on the women's side. So you had some at larges out of the CIAA. But what about out of the SIAC? In that turn, you only get the champions. So Savannah State was the champions for the SIAC, and they get to carry the burden of being the lone SIAC school. But then you also have Lincoln, Missouri out the GLVC, which I can't remember what that stands for right now, but let's stand for. Is it in here? I can't remember what they stand for, but the GLVC, the point is, they were able to make it from that conference as well. So you get automatic bids. So that is 1, 2, 3 automatic bids on the men's side. On the women's side, I've already painted out who made it out of the CIAA, and we know that Virginia State, the runner-up, was an at-large, right? But what about the automatic bid out the SIAC? That's the only. I'm going kind of out of order. This is not the order I meant to do it. I meant to go women's, men's, but I ended up going conference by conference. So excuse me, I'm getting a little scatterbrained now, but I'm trying to make sure I get everybody. But then you have Miles College on the women's side, who ended up representing it. And it's funny because they're going to take on the number 1 seed. They're going to take on Union. Not Virginia Union, but Union. So that's the teams that you have to look forward to. We'll probably track some of this as we go, depending on how it goes, guys. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to be back about George and the potential replacements for George. I have a couple of names that I want to list out that I think we should not forget about, and I want to talk about the reasons why an interim head coach makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about that on tomorrow, as well as preview the SWAC tournament. So we have a stacked out episode tomorrow. We have a stacked out episode the day after, because we're going to do the same thing, a George topic followed by the MEAC, and then that'll take us all the way to Wednesday, guys. I'm excited. This is the biggest news that you will get in the middle of March. It's the biggest news you will get in March. Anyway, in the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.